On this week's episode, I'm joined by Simon Wolf and Ryan Opaz, co-authors of the award-winning book, Foot Trodden, about Portugal and the wines that time forgot. Simon is originally from the UK, living in Amsterdam. Ryan is originally from the US, now a Portuguese citizen living in Porto, and both share a love of Portugal and Portuguese wines. We discuss, amongst other things, history of Portuguese wine, holding on to tradition while embracing the future, and all things Portugal, like food, diversity, landscape, grapes, and of course, the people. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, the Simple Life, and I'm delighted to be joined here by Ryan Opaz and Simon Wolf. Guys, hi, thanks for being on the podcast.
Pleasure, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Did I pronounce the name correctly? Wolf is easy. Did I pronounce Opaz correctly, or is it Opaz? In Portuguese, it could be Opaz.
It could be Opaz in Portuguese.
The piece. Yeah, very nice,
exactly.
Very nice. Well, let's start with you, top left, Simon. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm also like Ryan. I'm living in a different country to the country I was born in. So I'm a Brit. But I live in Amsterdam. I write about wine, which is a nice job. And thanks to this man down here, Ryan, I kind of developed a passion for Portugal over the last few years.
Awesome. Well, over to you, Ryan.
Well, I'm Ryan Opaz. I live in Portugal, in Porto. I'm originally from Minnesota in the US, and I've been in Europe since 2005. And I'm here. We have a book because of a partnership between me and Simon, I guess. That's the best way to put it.
Amazing. Yeah, the book there behind you, Ryan, Foot Trodden.
Exactly.
And that's why we're here, is to chat a little bit about the book and to chat about your guys' experiences with Portugal. But we'll get on to the book. I will say one thing. You guys are the worst people to follow on Instagram, because it's just food and wine, food and wine, food and wine. It's horrible. It's just not good. You know, I'm always hungry or thirsty if I see your guys post on Instagram. It's a big problem.
Well, we're just working hard, you know. We're both extremely diligent. So,
I appreciate your journalistic integrity. Yeah, it's amazing. But I mean, Ryan, take us back. Your first visit to Portugal. What were your expectations? What surprised you about this country? Was there a Portuguese connection already?
Yeah, I had my aunt back in like 77 or so. She was an exchange student in Portugal, in kind of a weird fluke. She ended up spending a year here and making some very good close friends and family. And then in the 80s, my grandparents came with her again and got to know the same people deeper and more personally. And it was through those connections that I found myself here in 2003 with my wife. We came to basically have our wedding. Instead of a normal wedding, we just decided to go backpacking in Portugal. So, it was, we came in the worst time of year. We came in January. It was cold, rainy, and we almost didn't fall in love with it, but
it was a bad start.
There was some moments that, there were some moments that were tough, but in the end, the people really won us over. As you probably know, people here in Portugal, they can put a smile on your face, and their hospitality, has no bounds. So I think that's really what made us fall in love. You know, the wine and food, I expected to be good. I was pleasantly surprised that it was affordable, very affordable and very delicious. But I think in the end, it was the fact that we were embraced by the people we met and treated very familiar. And that's kind of what made us fall in love and made us decide in 2005 to come back to Europe. And I spent the first 8 years of that journey living in Spain, trying to convince my wife to move to Portugal. So eventually, when she was about to have our first child, we left and we came here and moved to Porto. And I have to say, it was the best thing I think we've ever done in our life. So it's been a good ride, and it's definitely a fun place to live.
Awesome. And you're a citizen?
I am a citizen. I finally got my citizenship last year, and that felt very good to be able to, call this place home permanently.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. I got mine in 2019, and yeah, awesome feeling as
Yeah,
well.
exactly.
The two biggest guys are the ones that live here permanently, Simon. I mean, it's no coincidence, But how about you? I mean, tell us a little bit about your journey and your relationship with this country.
Yeah, I mean, I, I have to blame Ryan for almost everything, really. I mean, the thing is,
You always do.
yeah, I mean, I had this overarching interest in wine for a long time, but when Ryan and I met in 2011, I think, and became friends, then he kind of enticed me to Portugal, which was really a country that I didn't know a great deal about from a wine perspective. But he just kind of gently enticed me here, and kind of opened a few doors and let me see that actually, yeah, it's one of the most fascinating wine countries in Europe, if not the world, I think. And yeah, I really saw that it's a very understated country. People don't make a big fuss about what they're doing, but I was fascinated, really. So it didn't take me long to be drawn into all these interesting traditions and cultures. And yeah, it was unexpected, but the message was received loud and clear, really.
Yeah, unexpected. It's a good word, because I interview a lot of people who kind of come over to Portugal, and one of the questions I asked them about when they first came to Portugal is, what were their expectations? And most people go, I didn't have any expectations, because they don't really know what to expect. It's a country that kind of flies under the radar. You don't know, there's nothing really marketed about the place on a big scale. So, I mean, maybe the better question is, what were those unexpected things that you encountered, and those things that surprised you when you first came?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting what you say, actually, because I had one previous experience of coming to Portugal, and I traveled to Portugal with my then partner. We were holidaying in Spain. We were holidaying in Salamanca, and one day we said, "Oh, we're so near to Portugal. Why don't we just hire a car and drive to Portugal? That should be an amazing country. We could drive to the coast. We could see the Atlantic. It'll be amazing." And it wasn't amazing at all, because we didn't know how to find anything. We couldn't figure out where you needed to go on the coast to find anything that we would have called beautiful. So we ended up in Figueira da Foz.
Yeah, that's a bad place to start, actually.
and we sort of didn't know what to make of the food. The food at first glance, it just seemed very, very simple, really. And I think we were expecting to be wowed, and we weren't wowed at all. And it took me a lot longer to realize that in a way, it's a very Portuguese experience. People don't shout and make a song and dance about what is good or what is amazing. You kind of have to dig deep, really, and go looking a bit harder. So that first experience for me was a disappointment. And then it's only when Ryan and I met, and I came multiple times, that I kind of began to understand this kind of very, quiet, or almost sort of rather humble nation.
It's interesting. It's almost like for both of you, you needed somebody to take you in a bit deeper first. Like, so for you, because Ryan's first experience was pretty bad the first couple of days. You guys were considering getting out of here quicker, and then you met someone who kind of pulled you in deeper, and you were like, okay, hold on, there's another layer to this that I haven't seen yet, and that seems to be quite a common thing in Portugal.
Well, I think with what's interesting, the way Simon says, is I was thinking, I work in tourism now, and we have people come here for a week and they fall in love with Portugal right away. And I always bring up this story that nowadays you see cafes with terraces with people sitting outside in the sun. And it was the tourists that taught the Portuguese to do that, because you go back about 10 years and there would never be terraces outside with people sitting in the sun. It was like the tourists came and said, let's go sit outside. And I think the Portuguese, what me and Simon experienced was that humble state where they still weren't putting anything out in front of you. Today, you walk down Porto or Lisbon, and everywhere you look, it's alive, it's vibrant, and it's pushing, its culture a little bit in front of you. But you could still have that spirit experience in the smaller towns in the countryside, of course. And I think, at least in my case, you had to walk into cafes and talk to the locals to figure out what you were there for, what you were supposed to eat, what you were missing. And sometimes they wouldn't even tell you because it didn't occur to them that you wouldn't know about it. That was a very common experience here. Oh, yeah. Oh, you don't know that there's this beautiful place around the corner. It's like, no, I don't. So, today it's a slightly different experience, I think, but it definitely was a strange starting point for both of us.
Yeah, it is. I mean, certainly, like you said, in Lisbon and Porto, they do a better job of saying what this restaurant is or what this cafe is. But where we are, like the area that we are in, the sort of Silver Coast area, you could still drive past a restaurant. It could be the best lamb restaurant in the world, and you wouldn't know it because of the outside. It's there's a place where it's very, very popular with the locals, and it's become more popular with the internationals in our area called Solar dos Amigos. It's this really good grill restaurant. But if you drive past the village, you wouldn't know that it was there. You drive past and you'd blink and it's gone. So it's pretty, I get that a lot. But Ryan, maybe you could just tell us a little bit how did that experience in Porto, in the Douro, and those first things lead to you doing what you're doing now? Because you mentioned you're doing wine tourism. Tell us a little bit about how that happened and your business.
Well, I mean, I've been working in wine since around '98, and I came to Europe hoping to work in wine, and I never really found my dream job in wine. But I think in 2003, the story that you're thinking of from the book, when I first came here, we knew we were going to backpack around and taste and see things. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do. And all I had was to tell people I worked in a wine shop back home, which actually led to quite a few very strange adventures when people misunderstood that I wasn't a huge wine magnate. But we went to the Douro on a very rainy weekend, and basically almost gave up because it was so wet and there was nothing to do and nothing to see. And a friend of mine, Cristiano Van Zeller, somebody who became a friend that weekend when he gave us a quick tour, led us to discovering what the real Douro was and seeing the actual majesty that it is. And that led to me realizing I wanted to come back. And when I came back, I moved to Spain in 2005. The first trip I did was about a week after being here. I came to the Douro immediately and started knocking on doors looking for work, which I never really found. I ended up creating my own work, writing about wine and then consulting wineries on communication and marketing. But today I think let's pretend COVID never happened, and I'm in a much happier place where I no longer have to work in that way, but I get to bring people to the Douro to have that experience that I first had when you come up over the hill and you see the huge expanse of vineyards, and you get to go to the family-owned vineyards and talk to the people there. And so today, that's what I do. I mainly Americans, Canadians, people outside of Europe. I bring them here and show them around. And because of that, and because of the connections I've made over the past 16 plus years or whatever, Simon and I had a lot more ability to write the book that we decided to write. Because as we just got done saying, people don't give up their stories because they don't even realize they have them. And me and Simon had to spend a lot of dinners with people to uncover stories that we didn't even know existed. So that's kind of where I am today, I guess.
Awesome. Okay, so I mean, that's links perfectly to you and Simon connecting. Simon, tell us about that relationship, and what was it that Brian told you? I'm assuming there was a lot of enthusiasm that made you think, okay, hold on, there's something here that I want to explore further in terms of the wine, in terms of the book, and how that all came about?
Yeah, I think it's actually a connection that we forged fairly early on, where we just both realized that we're quite adventurous in terms of, we like tasting and experiencing stuff which is a bit off the beaten track. So we kind of discovered this shared love for adventure, if you like, in wine. And I think Ryan, I don't remember that Ryan like specifically sold me on that, but he just kind of gently eased me into the fact that actually Portugal is where I'm going to find a lot of this adventure. I'm going to find unusual wine traditions. I'm going to find interesting grape varieties. He just kind of opened the door a little bit, kind of left it gently ajar, and of course I pushed it open and stampeded in.
Yeah.
And in terms of, what I should also say, in terms of collaboration, I mean, we started collaborating when I did my first book about orange wine, which the Portuguese call Coutumante. And I asked Ryan if he would like to work with me as a photographer, because I admired his photography for a while. So that was our first kind of serious collaboration. And then while we were working on that book, which involved traveling a bit together in other countries outside Portugal, we started talking about, wouldn't it be great to do a book that tries to open people's minds a bit and show them all this amazing stuff that's happening in Portuguese wine that we just don't think is being talked about.
Yeah, perfect. Who wants to introduce the book, the name, and what it's basically about? Which one of you want to jump in there?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, the name's Foot Trodden, and I think it comes a bit. Because, as I said, there was a lot of stories. I think halfway through this book, we discovered things that, in 15, 16 years, I hadn't experienced firsthand. I mean, there's still a lot of things I think still to discover even here. Every once in a while, when Simon's here, we stumble upon traditions that we didn't know existed. But foot trodden being the practice of pisapé, walking or stomping grapes. I remember the first time when I was here in 2003, having winemakers apologize to me about their foot-treaded grapes, not so much in the Douro where it's a point of pride, but in other regions, they would apologize because they didn't have the money to buy the fancy machine. And while I appreciate that sentiment, they wanted to show that they were, important to making good wine. What they failed to realize is some of that beautiful nostalgia and some of that traditional winemaking actually is important cultural point. So when we started the book, we debated how we were going to organize it. And while we organized it by region, the real idea is what is the tradition or the story behind each region that kind of helps to define it. And there's plenty of crossover. Every region has some of those stories, but we wanted to find a winemaker or a few winemakers in each region who could help us explain some of these traditions and why they were still important and worth not, giving up or moving away from, and embracing in this modern world we have.
I mean, so Simon, north to south, you guys take a kind of a journey down the wine regions of Portugal.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we when we started on this, we were very clear it's not going to be a guidebook, so it's not necessarily going to cover every single region in Portugal, but we wanted to, we wanted to kind of, I guess, take the reader on a bit of a journey through Portuguese culture and the Portuguese landscape, using wine as the lens, effectively. So yeah, it's a meander through most key parts of Portugal, with one or two exceptions, and using personal histories, personal stories to kind of illustrate Portuguese wine, basically.
Well, I mean, I don't want to go in too much detail with the book. I've started reading it. I'm just annoyed. I've only got one signature in the book. I've got Ryan's. Simon, we need to rectify that. Okay.
We can sort that out.
Yeah, we can sort that out.
Yeah.
But, so I don't want to give away too much of about the book because people need to buy it. It's fascinating. I'm into chapter 4 already and loving it, guys. So also, Ryan, I just want to tell you the photos are just stunning. They're understated, they're elegant, they're raw and simple, which I think is such a good picture of what that area is about. They're not over edited. It's lovely. So congrats on the imagery. It's beautiful. Simon, I mean, why did you, or maybe both of you, but why did you, when you're talking about Portugal, wine is always a good place to start because it forms such a deep part of the fabric of Portugal. It's in the DNA. And north to south, there's a wine region. There's a wine story. There's a grape that isn't, in a region that isn't anywhere else. So it is a great place to start. It's got so much history and layers to it, the wine story of Portugal. But why did you feel the need to unpack that? Why did you feel the need to kind of dissect that part of Portuguese culture and history?
Okay, I felt quite passionately, and Ryan and I discussed this a lot actually, that there was a message that wasn't getting out, and I had this experience so many times with people in the wine world, people who are very knowledgeable about wine, and you say to them, what do you think about Portuguese wine? Do you have any favorite winemakers in Portugal? And they would, they just look at you with this kind of stare, like
blank and then on their faces.
And then sometimes they would apologize and say, well, I really feel like I should know about something interesting in Portugal, but I just don't. And we kept on coming up against this. And I can remember having a conversation with an American importer. I think it was a lady from New York. And she said to me, one of our main problems selling Portuguese wine in the US is that we have to get the message across to people that it's not the same country as Spain. I mean, Portugal it's ignored. And somehow these beautiful traditions, these fascinating wines, grapes, terroirs, they're just people just don't know about them. It's really like the country hides its light under a bushel sometimes. So I just felt that in a way Portugal and its wine, it's a little bit the underdog really. And so the idea was just to try to turn the spotlight on it and really show everyone, hey, if you're interested in wine, if you're a serious wine person and you love wine, you need to come here and you need to see what's going on here because it's amazing.
And I think also, I mean, as Simon and I ran into many times, Portugal has lived under the shadow of port and cheap Vinho Verde. Those are the ambassadors for Portuguese wine for so long. And so, people, ironically, some people are surprised when they hear that port wine's made in Portugal, but I've run into that. And
quite scary thought.
Yeah, I know, but it does come up and I always have to laugh. But I also feel, just as Simon said, there needed to be something. I remember when we were going to start writing the book, we did research to see what books existed. And there's a couple more text-like books, but there aren't a lot of books that kind of try to put, and I'm not saying we fully succeeded. I hope we made a dent in it, but try to put wine where it belongs in the story of Portugal. Portugal, you can't talk about Portugal without wine. I mean, even here, wine is wine, not fortified, not sparkling, is still taxed as food. It's still seen as something of caloric value. Mm-hmm. It's still something that everybody has a barrel in their cellar. Out of the farm, Grandpa makes a couple barrels once a year. So I think people would come here before the big tourism boom and before things have started to change a bit. And they, you sit down to dinner here, you don't decide which wine you're going to drink. You start eating and you ask, where is the wine? And whatever comes to the table is what you're going to drink. It's part of that culture. And it is just a little aside. What's so funny about that is we have a good mutual friend, Diogo at Prova Wine Bar in Porto. And he just loves the fact that when he goes into the Douro or Dow or other places, he always tries to eat at the smallest little shack of a tashka, where somebody's probably making their own wine, and he always orders a table wine. And I could tell you at least 3 or 4 times I've gone into Prova at night, and he's pulled out a water bottle filled with some red creation. He goes, Ryan, I was in the Douro today and I found this little tashka where Senor Manuel was making this wine. You got to taste it. And like this thing that came out of a barrel in the back is just brilliant and fabulous. And I think that's what I really like about being here, is you could still discover things like that.
Yeah, it's a place that I've been here 13 years. It's a country that continuously surprises you all the time. And you mentioned earlier that you're still discovering stories. We might have to talk about a foot trodden too, because you guys are going to keep discovering more and more and more. Look, for you, Simon, I want to get onto the grape growers, because you start the book saying this is for the grape growers of Portugal, which I first read and I was like, okay, cool sentiment. But when you start then reading about, when you go into the history about the cooperatives and everything, even more than it lends its weight. The weight of that first line is so much more profound and beautiful. But for you, what makes this such a unique wine? I don't want to say wine region. It's not a region, it's a wine country. It's as small as a region in some parts of the world, but what makes this such an interesting wine country for you? What makes it so unique, so different to a lot of the other places that you've done your research and traveled and experienced?
I think what's special about Portugal is that for whatever reason, and it's hung on to a lot of very old traditions, and very, very if you like, ancient ways of doing things. And we can argue that is partly because of its somewhat troubled 20th century history, but it's hugely exciting as a wine person, as someone who loves wine, when you find that these old ideas about doing things that can often create rather beautiful wines, and it can create rather authentic wines that really seem to have a soul, things that have died out in other parts of Europe where technology took over, where this idea that everything has to be done in the modern way. And Portugal has somehow kept a very, very deep connection with its traditions. But as Ryan said, often almost with a feeling of shame. It's like, oh, we don't have the money to update this. But of course, to the wine lover in me, or the wine geek, that's something beautiful. When you can discover that foot treading is still actually one of the most efficient, one of the most gentle ways to ferment and extract all the good stuff from grapes. There are grape varieties growing in vineyards here that it's never occurred to people to abandon them or phase them out. They're just, they've been growing there for 100 years and they still are. So you don't get this everywhere in Europe. People had such a drive to modernize and obliterate the past. And sometimes it's been a real struggle to go back to it and say, well, actually, we shouldn't have got rid of all of this. There was good stuff in there. But in Portugal, it's still relatively easy to find that past, to find those traditions, and to still find people making wine in a way which just feels very, very raw, very, very authentic.
Yeah, Ryan, why do you think that is? You alluded to a couple of things. We've got the history side of things with why Portugal's kind of held on to those traditions. It's something that I love and kind of sometimes get frustrated with Portuguese cultures is that kind of embarrassment about, hold on, we're a little bit backward, and you're thinking you don't have to be embarrassed. It's a beautiful thing. Like, it's something that I'm incredibly proud of when I think it's my country now as well. And I think I'm proud of that. Be proud of it as well. But Ryan, what do you think it is? It seems like it's a combination of necessity, a combination of, it's a little bit of an accident that it's happened this way. And then in some cases, we have purposely held on to those traditions in our own quiet way. Why do you think some of those traditions have kind of held, and why we've held onto those traditions in Portugal?
I mean, I think that that's not a simple
No,
answer,
it's not a simple question. Yeah.
but I think there's a couple things. I think one is, yeah, a family. Family is so important here, and I'm not to say family isn't important in other places, but we have a joke here that if there's any problem, a Portuguese person has an uncle who can solve it. If any problem I have, I just have to make a call to an uncle, and they're going to be my plumber, my lawyer, my whatever. And why I say that is that it's Easter weekend here, and the city's empty. Everybody's up in the country at their grandpa's house or whatever, and on that house, in the basement, there's probably a stone lagar, where grandpa makes his 1 barrel of wine. Or down in the Alentejo, they head out to the villages, come together, and they have communal feasts and things. And I think, out of necessity, for sure, Portugal has never in recent memory been very rich, and so there's been a necessity to conserve and to have a little piece of land so that you could have your own vegetables and make your own wine. But then family, it became one of those things where I have so many friends here who, it gets to harvest, they're like, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, it's the weekend we go out and we help grandpa pick the grapes. Or and that isn't just because of the wine. It's because the family comes together. You see the new grandkids, you help make the wine. Even the matanza, the killing of the pig in winter, whole families will come together to make the sausages. And families will, when you meet them, families that you don't even expect it, will proudly give you a chorizo that, oh yeah, this is a chorizo my grandpa made, you should take it home and try it. And they say it like everybody has that. One thing, this maybe illustrates it even more, the Portuguese are probably some of the most inviting and welcoming people, but family is so important that they forget not everyone has family. So when we first moved here for, I don't know, it's one of the holidays, and all of our friends disappeared, and we were left in the city kind of by ourselves going, wow, it would have been fun to go to some of these families. And I brought it up with a good friend of mine once. I'm like, you went to Easter? And he's like, yeah, what'd you do? And I'm like, well, we just sat, everyone disappeared. He's like, oh, you should come. And it didn't occur to him that I wouldn't have family here, because that's what you do. So I think, to sum it up, I think we underplay that role in the wine industry even more so. As Simon and I always joke, everybody's related in the wine industry. I mean, you touch one winemaker and his 3 uncles and brothers, and they either have land, they're making wines, they're selling, fertilizer, whatever. It's just all connected. And so, there was this idea, well, grandpa's going to keep making his wine. We may have to go make something more modern for the international market, but we're still going to drink grandpa's wine. And we can't let that go, because then we have no reason to go out to the farm.
Yeah. I kind of, we keep using the word understated and these kind of things. And I kind of sometimes feel like, I mean, we're up to season 2 of the podcast. I've done more than 100 episodes. And when I speak to the Portuguese guests and I say to them, listen, why are Portuguese people so welcoming? Why are Portuguese people so warm? They kind of don't know how to answer the question, because it's kind of like, well, it's what we do, and this is what you're alluding to, is that there's kind of this. I remember sitting once at a barbecue with a whole bunch of Portuguese people, and they all said to me, Dylan, why are you here? And I was looking around at how beautiful everything was. We were sitting on this farm. We could sit outside. We didn't have to worry about moving in, because, we weren't going to get burgled or robbed or hijacked or anything. That's typical South African talking. But it was this beautiful thing. And I was looking, and I said to them, can't you see why I'm here? Like, this is how beautiful this culture is and this way is. Can't you see it? And for them, it's just, this is what we've known. This is what we've done our whole lives. And there's a beauty and a purity in that as well, which I really like. But I wanted to come back to tie that into a question for you, Simon, and back to the grape growers, because one of the things that comes out in the writing is this. It's not just about the wine. It's not just about the history. There's a strong theme about the people in your book. And you guys, Ryan mentioned it earlier with the story. There's a story that unfolds in each region. What do you want to say about that connection? Talk about the wine growers first of all. Why was that so important to you? And then the people that run through these stories as well. I know that's not a simple question, but I'm trying to keep everything condensed, but it's a challenge.
It's not a simple question, but I think one of the things that we realized, and one of the reasons we put that dedication in the book, is because just about everyone in Portugal has a connection to a vineyard, to a plot of vines. It's really, if you go back in anyone's family, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we've got a little patch of vines there, actually," or grandpa had a little vineyard here, or still does. So we actually, in a way, it was our way of saying this is dedicated to everyone in Portugal, because wine and grapes is just something that everyone has always had here. But I think in terms of the stories that we wanted to tell, we kind of had a bit of a message that it's been a bit of a struggle sometimes to find a way of packaging that up and putting it on the world stage, or to find a way of taking that tradition, taking that heritage, and somehow shoehorning it into a shape that is understandable by people outside Portugal. So in a way, it's that struggle and how people have responded to it that we wanted to try to get across in the book. And of course, there is the weight of history on this too. And one of the things that we realized quite early on was that it's very difficult to understand Portuguese wine and understand Portuguese people and their relationship to wine and wine growing if you don't go deep into the history and the culture, because it has been it's been a rough ride, especially for people in farming communities. People who've worked the land have historically not received a great deal of credit or reward for what they did. And now I think thankfully that's changing in the wine world, maybe for the first time in 100 years or more. We're now in a place where Portuguese wine growers are appreciated and valued. But it's been a long ride.
Yeah, I mean, it is. People need to read the book because it is absolutely fascinating. There's things that I didn't know. And I've spoken to quite a few people. I've got a brother, and you guys know João, my brother-in-law. He's well connected in terms of wine industry, and there's things that I read in the book already that I didn't know. So it's people need to get into it. It's really fascinating. There's something that does come up in the book which I want to ask you, Ryan. You see this sort of kind of meshing and amalgamation of these modern sides to the wine industry that the Portuguese guys are embracing, but they're not letting go of the tradition. And almost it's like this some of those traditional things have now come full circle and are kind of back in fashion. But it's, it wasn't a cyclical thing for the Portuguese. We just never let it go, as we've already alluded to. What do you see with that sort of combination of things, the modern and the old, and how that just somehow works in Portugal? We see it in the way that we do business a little bit. We see it in the way that we cook. We see it in this tech startup thing that's happening in Portugal, where we've managed to find a way to reinvent ourselves. But this is something that the Portuguese have been doing for generations just to survive some difficult moments. What do you want to say about that?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people discount or don't understand the importance of 1986 in Portugal. I mean, that's when we entered the EU, and coming out of a dictatorship that fought to keep the country somewhat rural and self-sufficient, and then being launched into a world of having money thrown at you from the EU to do things like build big roads. The wine industry at that time, I think at the time it was the biggest, if not still the most sold wine in the world, was Portuguese, and nobody knew it, Mateus Rosé. But these small winemakers who in the Douro for the first time could start making and selling wine direct from their wineries due to changes in the law, and the opening up to international businesses, and those businesses seeing lots of grapes and thinking we can make some money here. People rush to buy silver tanks and the fanciest machines to make the most industrial quantities of wine as possible and take advantage of this opening up. What's interesting is in the 90s and early 2000s, that was just out of control, and not out of control in a bad way. It was a good thing. But I found, Simon and I have talked about this a lot, that, Portugal didn't know how to sell it because they didn't have a story about themselves yet. So they had to go looking at other people's narratives to sell their wines. So they saw that big oaky wines made in a heavy extracted way were what people were drinking on the international markets. So we need to go out, we need to do that. And that way people respect us as winemakers. And while that wasn't a traditional way of making wine here, it was something that was, enabled with technology. And it worked. It got Portugal noticed. People said, whoa, you can make big, bold wines here. But the funny thing is, you'd still go, those same winemakers would still go to their grandpa's farm on the weekend and stomp grapes in the Lagar, or make some wine in the Talia down in Alentejo or other places. And actually, ironically, I've never thought of it this way, but the big effort to modernize some of the vineyards and do big plantings and things left a lot of less productive vines abandoned, which Simon and I were just down in Lisbon a few weeks or months ago, and we're seeing these old abandoned vines that are hundreds of years old that were forgotten because they weren't commercially viable to make these new wines. So some people like to say that the modernization was a bad thing for Portugal, and I think it definitely wasn't. It was a necessary step Portugal had to go through to discover who it could be. And I think it's still discovering who it can be as it begins to redefine itself coming out of that time period. And so today, we have those big wines, big industrial wines, and we have these traditional wines that are now finding the respect they deserve, so that those traditions don't, completely get squashed. And unfortunately, this all happened in a period of maybe 20 years or so.
It's happened very quickly.
Exactly. As opposed to other places in Europe, as Simon said earlier, where it was going on for so long that traditions were able to be destroyed and forgotten.
Yeah. Simon, besides the wine, what do you love about this country?
I think it's something you both said, really. It is that it's understated, needs it's very interesting when you compare Portugal with Mediterranean countries. I think a lot of people make that comparison, and Portugal is so different. People here are, they really do have this kind of slightly humble, slightly understated character, which I find is very different to Spain. It's very different to Italy, but it's charming, and sometimes it's hugely frustrating. When you're trying to write a book about something and you're shaking people up and down and trying to get them to offer up some nugget of narrative interest, and they just won't. Whereas you go somewhere in the south of Italy and they'll be banging their chest and telling you how great they are. It's very, very different culture here, but with a great deal of charm and so I think that's something that I really love. I love I think the influence of the Atlantic is something very special to me as well. It's extraordinary how much that defines this country. You just look at a map. Portugal's just one big coastline, basically. That's what it is, and it defines everything. It defines how the wines taste. It defines people's relationship with the land, everything.
I know the one thing Simon didn't mention, which we both love, and that's Sunday afternoon fish at the local grill. I mean, the Portuguese, I don't know how they do it, but they can grill fish like nobody's business.
Yeah,
it's just pure heaven.
True story. Ryan, for you mentioned becoming a citizen and how happy you were, but I mean, what were the things for you? You said, and actually, what you said is exactly what I say to people as well, that it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life was moving here. What were the things that made you decide to move here and stay?
I mean, to sound like a broken record, it was the people. Places. I remember when I moved to Europe, every little village I went to in every city and every country I wanted to move to, because it was so beautiful and so cute and so lovely. And I've, after whatever amount of time it's been, 17, 18 years living here, I've realized that I've started to understand the difference between beauty and comfort. And Portugal for me has both. I love visiting so many places and I love discovering new things, but it is understated, as Simon says. You don't have to constantly pound your chest to say, I'm here, this is me. You're free to just walk quietly in the park or sit by the beach and have a grilled fish with a caneca of wine. It's that you don't have to prove anything. Nobody's here trying to prove something, or I come from the US where everybody has a bumper sticker on their car telling you what they believe. And here I have friends who I know nothing about their politics. I don't even know what they do for work. And I've known them 15 years and they're my best friends. And I'm like, yeah, well, they work in insurance. I don't know, but that's not important. What they do is not important. It doesn't define them. It's the joke they can make over that fish that defines them to me. And I love that about being here. I can just be who I want to be and accepted for it, I guess.
Beautiful. For both of you guys, it might be a difficult question, but one thing that you would like people to remember and take away from this conversation, Simon, just one thing.
I think just don't ignore Portugal. Really, just embrace this incredible diversity and passion that there is here in wine and food. Just because people don't shout about it, don't ignore it.
Right.
I think we didn't say it explicitly, but the same thing, don't ignore it. But Portugal, as much as I love Porto and Lisbon, is so much more than the big cities that everybody gets to. If you come to Portugal, make sure you take some time to go up to a aldeia on a hill and walk into a place that you're not sure if you should be allowed into, because you're not sure if it's a private home or an actual kitchen to eat, which I've done many times, as you probably have too. Remember, Portugal's more than just its cities. It's a lovely landscape.
Awesome. How can listeners follow you guys online and stay in touch with your work? Foot Trodden 2. If Foot Trodden 2 is going to happen, I'll write the forward. Okay, let's agree on it now, because I think there might be something there. But how can people follow you guys online?
I mean, we're both fairly, we're extremely 21st century people. So you'll find us on Instagram and all the other usual places. We have a website for the book, so at foot-trodden.com. But yeah, it's pretty easy to track us down online.
Yeah, our name, Ryan Nopas and Catavino, Catavino. If you look up either one of those, you'll find us, or find me for sure. And
if you guys want to check out the Douro the way it should be checked out, go see Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. Come visit. I'll show you around.
Guys, a question that we ask all of our guests. Simon, you can go first, and then Ryan. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
I think that sums it up perfectly. Really, it's there's everything in Portugal that you need, but the food, the wine, the lifestyle. It's beautiful in its simplicity. It's not elaborate. It's not pretentious. It just is what it is.
I mean, Portugal's simple life for me is it's about life is in the living. It's not in the things. And being here, it's about just living, enjoying, and being a bit zen.
I like it. Guys, I've loved this conversation. It could have gone on forever. We might have to think about doing a second episode at some stage, a second version, because I think there's a lot more that we could have unpacked. But thank you both for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And for now, I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Simon and Ryan, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. And as we say in Portugal, Saúde. Welcome to the simple life.